I was quiet, I got this image of me dressed up as a Franciscan priest, because I went to a Franciscan church, so those were the priests that I saw. And my response to that was to get up and say, no, no way. And as we went to take pictures, Pope Benedict looked to me and he began to ask me about myself, who I was, where I was from. And I didn't want to miss that opportunity. I used that opportunity there to tell him, Holy Father, Pope Benedict, I'm really discerning a vocation to the priesthood. And he didn't waste time. He said, I will pray for you. Hello, my name's Father Paschal Uche, and I was born and raised in East London. Two wonderful parents, three, I joke, not so wonderful sisters. And I had a very beautiful Catholic family, and it began with my baptism, my parents taking me to be baptized. But it wasn't just an outward ceremony. They nourished the gift of my faith through daily prayer. We'd pray at night times, we'd pray at meal times. And when I look back, I can see how they really nourished the roots of my faith by teaching me to love God, taking us to Mass, helping me to serve regularly at Mass. And our Nigerian culture played a big part in that as well. We'd sing songs and melodies of great joy. Our life is a gift from God, and what we do with that life is our gift back to God. Our life is a gift from God, and what we do with that life is our gift. And as I look back, that really was key to the beginning of my life of faith. Life is a gift from God, and what we do with that life is our gift back to God. Is it true that God has a plan for your life? A massive yes. He has a plan for each one of our lives. And how do we know that? Partly we know it through the desire for happiness. There is not a single person on the face of the earth who does not have a desire for happiness. And we believe that's what God has planted into our hearts. I want to give my life back to you. Oh. I love what St. Augustine says. He says the man who goes to the brothel and the man who goes to the cathedral are looking for the same thing, but in different places, and one in the wrong place. And so when we know that God has got a plan for us, it helps us to seek that out. And that definitely was the case in my life. Our gift back to you. Knowing that God had a plan for me made me pray differently, made me ask the questions about life differently, because it was more about a discovery. God has something in mind for me. And that was and continues to be an adventure, an exciting thing to say, God, what have you got in plan for my life, for my day, for this year ahead? I love kind of reflecting on my childhood and seeing how God moved and worked in my heart in a very natural way, bringing me towards priesthood. And when I look back on it, I can see that there was always a desire for happiness. From the times that I played football and would watch Arsenal Football Club, to the times where it grew for education and wanting to be a doctor, there was always a desire for happiness. When I think about the specific moments in which I heard God's voice more clearly towards becoming a priest, it makes me laugh because it goes back to the time I was about 16 years old. And I remember praying at the end of the day. And as I was quiet, I got this image of me dressed up as a Franciscan priest, because I went to a Franciscan church, so those were the priests that I saw. And my response to that was to get up and say, no, no way. I don't want to be a priest. I want to get married and have a family. And then over the years, as I went through the struggles, as I grew in my love for God, something different was happening in my heart. I remember watching the documentary Fishers of Men. It's a vocations program for those who would like to become priests. And I could notice in my own heart a desire, a growing desire to do something great for God. Those worldly desires were naturally just falling away, and this more supernatural desire was growing stronger and stronger. I went through university and I was able to just weigh things, and nothing weighed like using my life to do something awesome for God. That really does excite me like nothing else. When I read the lives of the saints and had a sense of God's call, it made me want to run for it more and more. I think God has a wonderful sense of humor and a very different way of doing things. When I'm thinking about clearly hearing God, I remember praying and fasting on one particular day every week for something that I really was asking God for. Again, difficult time in our family, really praying for some kind of breakthrough. And I guess I'd convinced myself that because I'd prayed and I'd fasted on these particular days, there'd be the outcome that I wanted. And I remember the evening where we got through news that we were praying and hoping wouldn't happen. But my response to that wasn't complete despair and sadness. Even though I was upset, I had such a real sense that God was there holding me, that God was still there. I couldn't escape him even in the disappointment. And I think when I reflect on that, I'm reminded of just how close God is and how much greater his purpose is, but how he even cares for us, most especially perhaps when we're going through things that are difficult. And that's been incredibly important for me, even in my ministry as a priest, to know that God is with us in the storm. He's with us in the difficulty. He's with us in those dark times. He doesn't escape them, but he brings us through. And I'm grateful to God for his presence. There are a few things that stick out though in my childhood that brought me along this path towards hearing God's voice for the priesthood. I remember 16 years old, we had a mission team come into our school, and there we were able to go to confession if we wanted to. They'd shared the gospel with us, but there was no force. And it was such a powerful afternoon because people got up of their own freedom and went to confession to receive God's mercy. And I remember getting up for the first time freely, going to confession and experiencing something of God's mercy and peace. And I thought that was it. I'm in a good place with God. Little did I know that God would take me further and deeper. He always wants more for us. And the way that that looked was when my sister decided to leave the Catholic Church and she joined a Pentecostal church. Now that would have been okay if it was just her doing her own thing, but she was very anti-Catholic, against statues and Our Lady and the Rosary. So I had to understand a bit more my own Catholic faith. But the real journey to Jesus, the real journey to truth, is not the thing that happens in our head. It's the journey from your head to your heart. And God would open up that door through suffering in my family life. When my sister became quite ill and had mental health disorder, it was a time in which we all looked to God in a new way, not out of routine, but out of real desperation at times. And I remember going to a charismatic prayer group in my local parish that perhaps I wouldn't have gone to if I wasn't in this space. And when I went there, it was a place for me to cry, to open up, to meet God, and to meet God in the example of those whom loved God. There were people who really prayed, who really loved God. And I was just inspired by that whole time. And if I'm honest with you, the problems didn't get better, but my relationship with God grew so much deeper. And through that depth of love for God and growing in prayer life came a clarity that this world cannot give me the happiness that my heart desires. A clarity that even if I have a family and whatever else, that can break. A clarity that through it all, God loved me, loves me, and has a plan for me. And this was the very thing I needed to make the next steps in that discernment towards hearing God's voice, to follow him in this particular way towards priesthood. In 2010, we were all made aware that the Pope of the time, Pope Benedict XVI, was coming to visit us. And there was great excitement. In the media, there was some negativity. And 2 months before he came, I was asked a question, would I like to be the person to welcome him on behalf of all the young people of the UK? And you can imagine, I just grabbed that opportunity. I was so excited by the opportunity to do that. And I was asked to come up with a speech that basically spoke about what young people do in the church and a way of welcoming him. And so I had that all put together. It all got checked and signed and put through. And I remember that morning, just the excitement that began to well up in me. And I tried to calm my nerves. And after the Mass, I was patted on the shoulder and someone said, it's time now. You've got to go and welcome the Holy Father, welcome the Pope. And I remember coming out on the steps of Westminster Cathedral, seeing thousands of young people, and then the Pope comes out. And I thought that things would go silent and quiet and someone would then tell me, look, now's the time. But it didn't get quiet. Everyone was so excited. And so I just had to begin. And it was a really, really, really special moment. So just to say, I was 21 at that time. And so not yet a priest, I was studying pharmacy at university. And I remember coming out onto the steps, as I said, beginning this speech that I had practiced many, many times before. And as I said the first few words and then looked at the Holy Father, looked at Pope Benedict, the whole speech changed. It really did. Because I sensed in him a real sense of wanting to hear what I was going to say next, engaging with what I was sharing. And it helped the words to come off the page and to really come from my heart as I spoke to him on behalf of all the young people, not just present there that day, but from the UK. And I felt incredibly privileged and empowered to be able to do that. And as the speech came to an end, I thought I might be able to bow or to shake hands with him. But to my great surprise, I was ushered forward and I got to embrace him. And one of the things I remember was the softness of his face as we embraced. And as we went to take pictures, Pope Benedict looked to me and he began to ask me about myself, who I was, where I was from. And I didn't want to miss that opportunity. I used that opportunity there to tell him, Holy Father, Pope Benedict, I'm really discerning a vocation to the priesthood. And he didn't waste time. He said, I will pray for you. And I really believe that he did. And I was able to take that moment into my discernment, take that moment into the next steps as I journeyed towards priesthood. So immediately after having met Pope Benedict, the aftermath of that was kind of crazy because the whole country was in a wonderful place, and having specifically met Pope Benedict, it had a personal impact on me. I can't look at my life without that being a defining moment, really. You know, on one level, it was people talking about the event and the day. From that, I was asked to speak to young people and to take more of an active role, maybe publicly in the church. When I look back on it, I think my relationship with the church kind of deepened and changed. There was a sense of responsibility. I already had a growing sense of vocation, but there was also a sense of like, how do I then help people to love the Lord, love the church? And I had that kind of a responsibility when I would share in talks and things. Then I found myself in the seminary, and lots of the seminarians kind of took the mick a little bit in, the boy that met Pope Benedict. But it was a bit of a narrative because Pope Benedict was so important to all of us as seminarians. His works and his writings were things that we all enjoyed and could share about. During seminary itself, I needed the prayers that I hope the Pope was praying for me and that people were praying for me, because seminary isn't always an easy time. A lot of what gets you through is that you're hoping and praying to get to priesthood. And for all the joys, which I did have, of fellowship, of friendship, of study, of prayer, it needed God's grace to get me through those years of seminary. One of the great things about seminary was every year you were preparing for ordinations. For 5 years, it wasn't your own ordination, but you would go to ordinations and you get a sense of what the occasion meant, what the sacrament meant. So on the 1st of August 2020, in quite unusual circumstances because of COVID, I was in my cathedral and it was going to be the day of my ordination. I think I got up about 3 a.m. that morning. Literally felt like a fire in my chest. I got up and I began to pray, and I was a mess that day. The bishop asked me, is there anybody that you'd like us to pray for? And my dad wasn't present then because of COVID. And as soon as I said, oh, can you pray for my dad? It was tears from that moment to the end of my ordination. Tears of joy, tears of wonder, tears of gratitude, just tears. And then my mum presented my vestments to Father John Armitage, who vested me as I became a priest, as the bishop laid hands upon me and I became a priest. Joy is all that I can use to describe that whole day. And even though it was in very different circumstances to how I might have dreamed it, it's a wonderful testament to the truth of the sacrament. No matter what the circumstance and the situation, to be ordained is a truly wonderful, awesome gift for which I will be eternally grateful. Hearing about Pope Benedict's death was a great moment of sadness for the whole church, and definitely for me in particular. It took me back to the steps of Westminster and meeting him. It took me back to the books that I've read that he wrote. And it also took me back to the letter that he wrote personally to me. So just a couple of months before my ordination, my mum wrote to the Holy Father asking for prayers. And he very graciously wrote a letter that was read out on the day of my ordination. When everything had been said and done, the bishop said, sit down, and read out this letter in which the Pope commended me to Our Lady, that I would celebrate the sacraments worthily and well. And that letter is like a relic to me when I think about his great impact on the church and his personal prayer for me in my vocation. So I look back to him, or look up to him now as somebody who prays for us, as a real spiritual father, somebody who was gentle, somebody who had a great love for the Lord. In the midst of all his great theology and thought, was a simple, holy and gentle priest. And I aspire to such levels of authentic holiness as well. What do I enjoy most as a priest? My intimacy with God, growing intimacy with God. So I think explicitly it comes from celebration of the Mass, which I'm trying always to do reverently and prayerfully. And from that flows every other joy. Honestly, in the morning I get to meet with the families as they go into school each and every day, getting to know them all. I get to be called out to the hospital and to meet people in the last moments of their life, to journey with couples as they prepare to get married. And the variety of it is all anchored in this intimacy with Christ, deepening my relationship with God. And that's something that priesthood has brought more and more to my life. So I've been a priest for coming close to 3 years. How am I enjoying it? I'm loving it and growing in love with it each and every day as I discover what it means to be a priest. I remember my selection conference, there was a sister that asked me, what will I bring to the priesthood? And I think I said, I guess I'll bring myself. She said, spot on, you're going to bring yourself. You're going to become yourself. And it fills me with life and joy to know that being a priest is the route that God has chosen for me to fully become who he's called me to be in a way that gives him glory and blesses other people. I'm humbled by how the ordinariness of what I get to do, it touches and changes people's lives, souls, eternal destinations. Just to reflect upon it is a wonderful, wonderful gift. And 3 years in, I'm excited about what that will look like as I continue to follow the Lord in this way. So what do I do for fun? How do I chill out and relax? Well, some things never change. I still play football and love playing football, sometimes twice a week with the local dads or teachers from the school. I love playing music and singing. I watch films with my parish priest, reading books and chilling out with friends and family. I think it's so important to be grounded in the human things that God has gifted us with, to relax and enjoy the good things that He's given us. Oh, and also eating food. I love eating good food. So if you're a young person having watched something about my own life and vocation, what now would I share with you? I think I'd want to use the words of John Paul II and of Jesus before him. Do not be afraid. God has something wonderful, amazing, awesome for your life. Absolutely no doubt about that. Do not be afraid. Because if you step into what God is calling you to be, like St. Catherine of Siena said, you will set the world on fire. And that will begin with your own heart being set on fire for this God who is love. Our life is a gift from God, and what we do with that life is our gift back to God. Our life is a gift from God, and what we do with that life is our gift back to God. Life is a gift from God, and what we do with that life is our gift back to God. God, you have been kind, you've been gracious, you've been faithful to me. I want to give my life back to you. You've been patient and forgiving, you've been a friend in need. I want to give my life back to you. Oh, our life is a gift from God, and what we do with that life is our gift back to God.
Problems, worries, sadness. Are you seeking solutions?
Bible says,
Do not be anxious about anything. Instead, pray about everything. Choose faith over fear.